My name's Michael Maddocks. I'm the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment Programme Manager at Warwickshire County Council. And my role is to look after our JSNA work programme and work with colleagues to produce the JSNAs that we work on. I came 7 months ago, I think it was. It was August, I think, and talked about our Empowering Futures JSNA. And I can put in a plug here that I think the recording's still online because I saw it the other day. So if you want to catch up on that, you can get a double dose of me and go and watch that as well. Um, and so, Rachel invited me back to talk about what has happened since with the JSNA work programme in Warwickshire. And I'm going to be completely honest, I've come with a little bit of an agenda today, in that at the end, I'm keen to prompt some discussion and feedback as a overarch of the presentation. We're about to look at a new JSNA work programme, which is focusing on life course dashboards and creating live interactive products, which is what our Empowering Futures JSNA was. Um, what this presentation looks at is it's going to start with a bit of reflection on our previous work programme and focusing on one JSNA particularly that we've just completed, because actually that nicely summarises a lot of our lessons learned from the work programme as a whole, and then go on to talk about our initial planning for our new work programme. And then I want to get knowledge from this group with tips of how we're approaching it, thoughts, suggestions, comments, feedback, all of those sorts of things. Um, I had prepared a Menti as well, but given that we've got one open with a Q&A area, I'm going to skip over those because we'll just use that. So do, as Rachel said, pop any questions or thoughts in the chat as I go through, and we'll come to those at the end. So I've put this presentation in four areas. I'm going to start with a bit of background to the JSNA. If you are familiar with JSNAs, then please do let your minds wander for a couple of minutes. But for those colleagues who might not have come across JSNAs before, or perhaps there's a little bit of a reminder of what they are, I thought I'd go over that. We'll then go over some lessons learned from our adults with a learning disability JSNA, then look at the future work programme, and then, as I said, go to a Q&A and discussion where it'd be great to get thoughts and feedback on the work programme that we're shaping and ideas for us to how to improve that. So what is a JSNA? So Joint Strategic Needs Assessments. It's a mouthful, which is why we call it JSNAs. Are reviews of health and care needs and strengths of the population. It's an opportunity for us to pull together data intelligence insight into a shared evidence base that can then be used as strategic decision making. So that can include commissioning, delivery of services, all of those sorts of things. And a lot of the work that we try to do is how we can feed that in and support that. There is statutory responsibility of health and wellbeing boards. Health and wellbeing boards have to have a JSNA work programme. There is no guidance on how you do it, but you have to have one, which has a real advantage that it can be tailored to local areas and respond to feedback and priorities. But it means how we do it in Warwickshire is going to be different to how you might do it in your own local authorities or your own areas. And a really key part of JSNAs is the joint part. Um, they're a responsibility of a health and wellbeing board, which has members from across the health and wellbeing system on it. So they should be responded to by multiple partners. But equally in their creation, we try to get lots of different people involved. So we're always keen to work with ICB colleagues, with colleagues from our NHS trusts, with the community voluntary sector, to pull together this something that is joint and everyone can respond to. What we have done in Warwickshire recently, so way back 2017 to 2020, we took a place-based approach, which is, I understand, a reasonably common approach to JSNAs, where we split up Warwickshire into 22 different areas and did a health profile on each of these. In 2020, we changed that to thematic needs assessments. So this is selecting a population or a condition or a mixture of the two and doing a needs assessment about that for the whole county. And you can see the sorts of themes that we've had there. So we've had a few on children and young people, mental health has appeared a few times. We include the pharmaceutical needs assessment as part of our JSNA work programme, and I'm sure there might be colleagues on the call at the minute who are enthusiastically working their way through a new PNA as we are at the moment. And then our most recent one, Adults with a Learning Disability JSNA, which I'll talk about in a moment. We're also currently working on an LGBTQ plus JSNA, which ends our recent work programme, but I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. So I'm going to go over some of our lessons learned from the Adults with a Learning Disability JSNA. For a little bit of context before I get into this JSNA focuses on adults aged 16 plus with a learning disability in Warwickshire, and we particularly focused on health inequalities and wider determinants. So how does the health of people with a learning disability differ from those without a learning disability, and what in our socio-economic, cultural, environmental world impacts on these? And we had a really great representation from a range of stakeholders, and some of those listed there, and again, demonstrate some of that cross-partner working with the ICB, some of our NHS trusts. But it was a real success, I think, of this JSNA. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more in a moment. And in terms of what the document looks like, it's got three main sections: local population section, health of the population, and wider determinants. I thought the easiest way to talk through the lessons learned was to frame it in terms of our timeline, because I think there were specific points in our timeline that highlighted both what went well and what didn't go so well. So from the start, in terms of project scoping, we did a lot of engagement from the off in terms of key stakeholder groups to contribute to the scoping. And this is going to be a theme that keeps on coming back throughout the whole process, that this early engagement with those key stakeholder groups was really important in shaping the JSNA. So that included some of our groups from the ICB, so like we've got a learning disability and autism collaborative group that sits under the Care Collaborative, so we engaged with them, some of the council groups as well. And this all contributed to I think, and Warwickshire colleagues on the call might disagree with me here, but I think for a JSNA, for one of our JSNAs anyway, it was a well-defined scope that didn't scope creep too much. That's been a big lesson learned from some of our previous Warwickshire JSNAs doing them thematically. The risk of scope creep has been quite large. And I think it's a challenge when working in public health and people chuck around wider determinants of health, and that's everything, right? So how do you scope down everything? Where do you draw the line in terms of what's most important? And the more we dig into them, we get excited, we get interested, and the more you can uncover. Whereas actually from the off, we did a reasonably good job, I would say, of being quite focused, including with the wider determinant section. What didn't go well at this stage? November, it was a 3-month scoping process, which I would say is quite a long process. And this really has roots in how we prioritised our JSNAs in Warwickshire. So since we adopted our thematic JSNA work programme back in 2020, we started running prioritisation exercises. And the idea was that we ran this exercise and it gave us needs assessments for the next 2 years to go and work on. What tended to happen was people were great at suggesting needs assessments they needed in the short term. So we'd get commissioners saying, we've got a decision next year about this, can we do this now? But in terms of the medium to long term, sort of what we need in 2 years, we didn't always get the ideas in the same quality that we did for the short term. And this was one example where on our prioritisation process, this was prioritised as a disabilities JSNA. So initially that covered physical disability, it included different mental disabilities such as learning disability, huge. And it took a long time working with that team to scope down which particular aspect of disability we're looking at and sort of knuckle down there. And there's also a bit of a geographic footprint difficulty we found in this, and something again that's recurred with our JSNAs. Anyone who knows Warwickshire as an area might know that we have our ICB is Coventry and Warwickshire, and some of our commissioning footprint is across both Coventry and Warwickshire as well. Learning disability being one of these examples where a lot of our commissioning is done jointly. Doing it just for Warwickshire then prompts a lot of questions, particularly from stakeholder groups in terms of, well, what about Coventry? Can we include Coventry in this? And our line has always been happy to work with Coventry. We do it lots. They're great to work with. as long as we have the buy-in in terms of capacity and resource putting into it. We did have some conversations. It didn't align with other work going on, but it's a conversation we have a lot about the different footprints that we work over and what that means for our needs assessments. Moving on to the data collection and analysis point of this, I'm just going to praise it. We got a lot of data from different sources, so and being linked into different key stakeholder groups was important for this. So we had stuff from Fingertips and Poppy and Pansy, which we were able to pull. We worked closely with ICB colleagues who helped us use some PHM data in the JSNA, which added a different light to it. We also were able to access leader data, which is I was going to try and remember the full name. I've forgotten it, but it's a program of work that specifically looks at or reviews deaths of people with a learning disability and takes learning from it. So all of these different source areas we pulled together into one document. And there are some really interesting comparisons in the document and things that it highlights and actually confirms the picture from each other. So that was really great. And throughout the whole process, we also had that continual stakeholder involvement. That was great for passing data in, also really valuable for thinking about the so what from the data. So what is this insight telling us and how are we writing it? Next, we have the recommendation and output development. And I'm going to describe this as a happy accident in that our scoping, if I'm being completely honest, took longer than we expected. And it meant we pushed our deadline back for completion. Initially, we were going to take it to a September Health and Wellbeing Board. And as you can see at the end of the timeline, we actually took it to January. That was a knock-on of the scope and a project risk. However, what it did mean is because we tried to turn the analysis around in time so that we could have taken it to a September board, we suddenly ended up with 3 months to develop recommendations. And that, as a lesson learned from the JSNA work programme, was incredibly valuable. It gave us loads of time to have conversations with our stakeholder groups. We went round all the teams in public health. We had smaller conversations with specific teams and ended up creating a set of recommendations which felt very well engaged over, well supported, well formed. And so going forward, that is something we definitely want to be able to replicate. Has not always been true with our previous JSNAs, where recommendations come very late in the process and over a short period of time. With that, there was some variation in terms of the input and feedback we got into it. And this again is me going to go back to the stakeholder point that the groups we engaged with very well early on were brilliant. They engaged with it, they committed to it and want to work to take them forward. Some of the groups we hadn't had the conversations with didn't want to input in the same way. Means there may have been opportunities to help shape the recommendations a little bit more, or perhaps produce some extra and pulling out some of the so what around it. One of the other issues we had, and I'm going to show some of the outputs we produced, which again, a benefit of having that time period was we could do more with our output development and different resources. We struggled with some of the external outputs that we requested to have made. So one we really wanted made for this was an easy read. So Learning Disability JSNA, we want it to be read by our population if they would like to read it. So an easy read was very high up on the agenda. Having not worked with an easy read company before, we didn't appreciate the length of time this was going to take, and I think their capacity was mixed as well. We do now have it coming through, but it's taken a lot longer. And then finally, Health and Wellbeing Board approval. Overall, we got a really positive response to this, and actually some feedback that came before the Health and Wellbeing Board session from our chair was that this was very impactful. And again, the mixture of data going into that and having it from different sources into one focused picture. But also the way that we've developed the recommendations. We produced some high-level recommendations that are pitched at multiple organisations, but we then pitched some specifically for local authorities, commissioners, primary and secondary care. A lot of them were themes that were found in the multiple organisation ones, these high level ones, but actually pulling out some of that so what and specific actions was really valued by the board, and they really liked seeing some of that specific that is then easy to go and measure impact from. I mentioned outputs because this again is something that is going to be a big part of looking ahead at our future work programme, as something we've been developing more and more is, as well as producing an 160-page document, actually it wasn't quite that long, but it's a long document, the Adults with a Learning Disability JSNA, what can we produce that helps condense this information and makes it easier to go through? So a couple of things we did. On the left, we have the infographic that we worked through. It's a one-page infographic where if you're going to take away none of the key or not read the document, these are the key messages you need to know from the JSNA. We did other infographics, so the one on the far right, which might be quite difficult to see on this screen, but is on our website if you want to go and have a look at it, summarises our local population chapter and some of the key messages about the demographics of our population. And then in the middle, we've got that easy read that we developed, and actually something that, in terms of doing presentations and thinking about the dissemination of this JSNA, having had it put into an easy read format has been really useful for myself to think through, and a really interesting exercise. It's something we've tried to do with previous JSNAs, and definitely a focus of us going forward is how can we keep on making things easy for people to use, easy for people to digest. And then finally on this, how are we making sure it has an impact? And then one of our big fears is that we produce these needs assessments and they end up on a shelf gathering dust and nobody uses them. Again, I'm going to emphasize the stakeholder involvement in this, and that the groups that we engaged with, we've now mapped the recommendations we've made to different system groups. We're now going back to them to engage with them to buy into these recommendations. And so far, it all seems keen that they're keen to buy in and own these, which is really positive in terms of being able to see the impact and come back and look at that. But also has been easy for us to do because of that ongoing stakeholder engagement through the process. I'm going to not go into the impact too much more now because it's something I'm going to touch on later as a whole for the work programme and sort of looking forward. Before I go on to the work programme, this is one of those strategic moments I'm going to pause. I know we've got Fran on the call, who is one of our BI colleagues at Warwickshire, who works a huge amount on the JSNA and whose team is critical to produce these documents. Before I go on to the future work programme, I'll open it up to Warwickshire colleagues, Fran, or anybody else on the call, in case there's anything you want to add, which I haven't already.
I can come in for a moment, Michael. I just was reminded, as you're so beautifully talking us through the process, what a luxury it is to have an experienced project manager to help us analysts do our work and take us through this process and keep us on track and just be nice to work with. So I just wanted to say thank you, and it's been lovely to work with you on this. And I'm sure my colleague Rosie, who did most of the analysis, is on the call, Rosie Smith, hopefully would agree with me, and the importance of having that management as well, and how great it is for analysts to have that structure. So yeah, that's my only addition. Sorry to embarrass you.
You know, flattery will get you everywhere, Fran, with me. So no, thank you very much. I'll keep on moving forward then, because I'm keen to give good time for discussion at the end. So, future work programme. Bit of context. I mentioned these prioritization processes, and we created them to last every 2 years. Our current one is going to end when we produce the LGBTQ plus JSNA, which is due for publication in September. I'm saying cautiously. Yes, I think, no, sorry, July. I should know this as the program manager. So it's time for us to think about what are we going to do in the future, and we feel time for a different approach. So this is responding on a lot of feedback from our JSNA, some of which I've already mentioned, and hopefully you'll start to see how this is trickled through to our future thinking. But some of the others includes we've produced long Word documents. Stakeholders don't always find 160-page documents easy to use and navigate. They want something more concise, easier to jump in and get the key messages from. They take a long time to create, which is intense for stakeholders. I mean, we tended to allow 9 to 11 months to produce a JSNA, which is a long period of time to get people engaged with. We had a very consistent turnaround, which sounds positive and in many ways is. But it also means if you're producing 3 JSNAs a year, slapping down a whole load of recommendations and asking people to respond, that can be very overwhelming. And you might remember when I talked about the JSNAs that we've done, we had 3 children's JSNAs. Our poor children's team have had 3 sets of recommendations. I think the first 2 made 82 recommendations between them, which is a huge amount. So that's very intense. I've already talked about scope creep and broad scopes. And we also do tend to get requests quite soon after publication going, that was really interesting. Can we have the updated data? And we always think, well, how did you use the last data? Like, where's that gone? And is there anything we can do to do that? So we're carrying forward some principles for our new work program. The first is fewer JSNAs. The second is that we're going to move to online outputs, and I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. The third is that we want to put more effort into capturing the impact of the JSNAs. At Warwickshire, it's not been something we've been very good at all. So we want to focus to see how it's been used and to celebrate that. We want to use some of our previous JSNAs to pull out insight with different focuses. So, for example, one piece of work we've done recently with our housing board is to look back at all our JSNAs and go, okay, what do housing board need to know about all of the JSNA work we've done? And there's so much information we've pulled out. Just because it's not a housing JSNA, it doesn't mean there's loads of learning that can be highlighted. And we still want to regularly report to our health and wellbeing board, but this can take a different approach in terms of having more of an impact and action focus. So what we're thinking about is we've still got some what we call traditional needs assessments. So we're carrying over the LGBTQ plus one, which will overlap a little bit with our new work program. We've also got the pharmaceutical needs assessment, the PNA, which is due for publication by the 1st of October. But we're then going to be creating a series of life course dashboards, and we're going to create these using an agile project management approach. We're going to theme these around the life course. So we've already got a children and young people's one. That's our Empowering Futures JSNA. And we're going to look at creating an adults dashboard and an older adults dashboard. So we've covered the entire population. And you can see at the bottom the idea with how this covers and sort of the age categories that we're looking at. And then additionally, we want to focus on measuring the JSNA impact, and we also want to increase the JSNA visibility. And I'm going to talk about both of those in a little bit. But in terms of the agile needs assessments, there's some key principles that we're taking into this. I've already mentioned the agile project management. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. We are planning to be able to create and maintain these concurrently. So we're going to be trying to do this at the same time. There's going to need to be some careful management there in terms of stakeholder involvement and analyst capacity. But Brian's team have divvied up these dashboards so that we have a different lead analyst on each, although the whole team is going to be supporting in general, where there's enough stakeholder difference that we can think about how we could get these going concurrently. Our ultimate aim with these is that we want them to be live. So we're going to keep on updating the data and refreshing it so that we don't get asked, can we redo this JSNA a year later? It'll already be done. It's iterative, which means we're going to keep on building it, keep on adding to it, and very much at heart of Agile, we'll be able to publish something quite early on, and we'll just keep on building and adding to it depending on requirements. And we're going to make them editorial, and it's something we've been praised a lot for the Empowering Futures JSNA dashboard, that rather than chucking all the data we can at it, we're selecting the key points and just highlighting that data. That might change over time, and that goes into the iterative bit, but it makes it a much more usable dashboard to jump in and get that data and intelligence. And we're also been thinking about the geography that we want to analyse on and recognising some of the geographical challenges, as well as our place partnerships that sit under our health and wellbeing board, our different areas. So in Warwickshire, we've got North, South and Rugby as our 3 place partnership areas. How can we break it down to see that geographical variance? In terms of what we're planning to run it as a process, This is roughly what we're looking at. So the idea is we want to engage with stakeholders and get and know what decisions they have coming up, what are their requirements that we can then feed into this process. There's then, I think, quite an important stage of sense checking what they've asked for. Is it possible? Does the data exist? Are we able to get the data? Are we able to publish the data? All of those sorts of questions. And then in true agile fashion, we want to pull that all into a backlog and prioritize it. And in terms of how we do that, we've started brainstorming some questions which you can see there. So who's requesting it? What do they want? What will it be used for? When is it needed? Is there stakeholder capacity? And we really need that as part of the joint as part of the JSNA to get that engagement in. Is this intelligence already available and is the data available? And then once we've got our prioritized list, we'll work that into our sprints. To create, we'll then review that and sign it off. We can then rinse and repeat that process. Alongside that, we want to be measuring the impact. We want to be promoting created material and doing some of that dissemination. And in terms of our stakeholder ask, responding to that feedback of 9 months is a long time to create JSNAs, we want to be aiming for something like 6 to 8 weeks, so that if a stakeholder comes to us and says, I want to know this, they work with us for 6 to 8 weeks to produce it, and they then have that section that they've asked for. Linked to that, we need to ask our stakeholders for things. We need them to commit to agile approach and timelines. Even though it's a much shorter timeline they're engaging for, it's a lot more intense because we're going to be asking them for more in that 6 to 8 weeks. So we need them to have that capacity, and we need them to be able to prioritize the sprint meetings and block out that regular time, because if something starts slowing down in this process, it's going to have a knock-on effect for the whole work program. We need them to agree that we're going to prioritize it and there are going to be channels created for that. We're going to need to balance capacity, but we may also be able to consider other project management approaches. So something we've tried in Warwickshire a bit is the idea of hackathons, which has suited certain things. It might not suit others, but we can sort of review that and decide what's best. But we think there's a lot of pros in this process for our stakeholders. We think it's going to be shorter, more focused engagement for them. It's going to produce these sections quicker for people, hopefully. It's going to mean that they're going to have the data on an ongoing basis and we can revisit and build on it. And we're hoping they're going to get clearly defined roles and responsibilities during that time period, so they know what the ask is for them and what the ask is for us as well. In terms of our starting challenges, there's a couple I wanted to highlight because in a moment when we go to the discussion, I'm keen to get thoughts and feedback on that process, how we're building the work program. Some of the other things we've been thinking about that has been challenging is dashboard structure. So we want to create an intuitive way to structure the dashboards that are easy for users to engage with and find the content they're after. And when we did the Empowering Futures JSNA, we used the 6 school-aged high impact areas to structure it. It made a really nice structure. It's easy to jump into. We've got loads of options for the healthy aging part of it because there's loads of frameworks out there for older adults. We're struggling with adults. We can't find a health framework specifically for adults. We can see things like the King's Fund model and others that we could draw inspiration on, but we'd be really keen to know if anybody in this group has addressed adult health and any structures they've used for that. Another challenge we're facing is dashboard ownership. So for our Empowering Futures JSNA, there is a stakeholder group who owns the dashboard. They're responsible for deciding how we update it. We're linked into that group to help them. But we've realised we may struggle with this for adults and older adults because of the breadth that they can cover, particularly the adults one. And you think about the number of teams we have working supporting adults, there isn't easily a central stakeholder group. So that's why we're trying those prioritisation questions and trying to think about that. So any ideas or hints and tips from the group about managing that sort of thing, or ideas about how to prioritise to make sure it's a robust process? My last 2 slides before we go into that discussion just touch on some of those other areas. So we're really keen to measure JSNA impact. We've got a few aims with this. We want to report back to our Health and Wellbeing Board on how the JSNA has been used. It's something we get asked a lot when we take JSNAs there. What's this going to do? What's the impact? So we want to be able to go with a report and say, this is how it's been used, and isn't this great and wonderful? We want to share impact with stakeholders who were involved in creating the JSNA. So, for example, Fran's team on the call spends 9 months doing a huge amount of work. We then take it away. We want to be able to share with Fran's team how that's been used, as well as the other stakeholders who have been involved. We want to promote this more widely, and I'm going to talk about JSNA updates on the next slide, so I'll touch on that a little bit more there. But we can also use this to help inform our future work programs. So is there data that has been used a lot that we really need in our dashboards because having it live is useful? On the flip side, did we include data which nobody's used, is of little interest apart from it was interesting, and we can cut it? So that it will be really interesting to hear about that as well. So what we're doing at the minute is we've created and tested a set of questions, which you can see on the right, and we're starting to get that out with our key stakeholders to ask them to feedback. So we want to know what it is they've done, how the JSNA has informed it. Is the JSNA the direct reason? Is it responding specifically to a recommendation? Is it indirect? Would this work have happened anyway, but the JSNA has helped respond to it? Or had they never heard of the JSNA, but it just so happens that some of their work has responded to it? How's it demonstrating partnership working, and how are they capturing the impact of it is what we're looking at capturing. But equally very interested if anybody here has done some similar impact work, what you've asked for, your experiences collecting this information, all of those sorts of things. And this is a blue sky thinking. I'm going to add in a caveat. This is not accurate. None of this is real. But this is my dream of being able to go to a health and wellbeing board and go, we did this JSNA and look at this. So we can show them what's been acted on, what sort of activity are we looking at, what number of projects are we doing. So that, yeah, this is just me visualizing what I would love from doing this work. And then finally, we're thinking about how we can make the JSNA visible as we go into this new work program. Whenever we publish JSNAs before, we would do a big announcement. We've published it, we'll go talk to loads of people. But if we're chopping this down to here's a bit more data, here's a bit more data, how do we engage with people in the same way? So as part of this, what we've started doing is JSNA updates, and this is in two forms. The first is a 6 monthly newsletter we're producing, which gives a big overview of what's happened in the JSNA world. So this includes all of the updates to our dashboards, where live data may have been updated. We want it to include impact work, so case studies of how it's been used and some of those reports, flagging any work coming up, getting people involved, just an opportunity where every 6 months we can engage people. Separately to that, we're aware that some people might have real interest in specific sections of our live JSNAs, and they'll want to know when we've updated the data. And so we're also offering people to sign up for updates on specific pages of our JSNAs. The idea being that if you sign up to our school absences page on the Empowering Futures one, when we update that data, you'll get an email going, by the way, it's updated and this is the key message it's now saying. And that way we can get it to those key stakeholders who want to know the data as soon as it comes out and have it hot off the press so that they can go and use it. That brings me to the end of the talking section. These are all just the Menti bits I put up there. So perhaps it would be worth us going back to the Menti, Rachel, and we can pick up any questions people may have popped in there. But it would also be great to hear from people in this group thoughts on our work program. Have you tried something similar with Agile before? What are your experiences working with it? Any hints and tips? Have you done any work around adults dashboards, particularly about the structure there? Have you done any work measuring impact of intelligence work or increasing visibility, and ideas and hints and tips? And there was another question that has jumped from my mind, but I'd love to open it up anyway and get people's thoughts and ideas.
Thanks very much, Michael, for taking us on your JSNA update journey. That was really interesting, and I just think generally I think it's really useful for others to see what is being done in different areas, and how your thought process is, and what you've done so far is changing the way you're planning to do things as well. No, that's really interesting. I'm just having a look at Menti. So there's a couple of questions, one which are relevant to what you've just been talking about, and then if no one else says anything, then me and you can have a chat about the questions that, that you've just raised. I've always got an answer, Michael. Might not be good, but Fran has got her hand up, so I shall give. I'll hand the floor to Fran for a moment. Fran.
Oh, thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Michael, for taking us so wonderfully through all that. I just had an overriding thought when you were talking about our adults' future plan for our adults JSNA, our working age adults JSNA. And I have to say, my team of analysts, from what they've told me, are very excited to work on this JSNA because it's not a population we've looked at a lot. We get asked a lot about children and young people and babies. We get asked a lot about the older population for obvious reasons, adult social care, etc. But we don't get asked a lot about the working age adults. So we are really excited as a team to start looking at that. And obviously these populations don't exist in, distinctly from each other. Those working age adults are looking after their older relatives and friends, and they're looking after their children. So it's all interwoven, but we don't spend a lot of time looking at working age adults. So just to say, we're very excited. And also, maybe it's a good question for your analyst teams. What would you be excited to look at if you could? Because you're sometimes surprised what the analysts say. I'd always like to look at carers, for example. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in there. And I see there's a few questions, so we'll deal with those.
Thank you, Fran. Yes, I have as anybody who's a regular here will know, I have current first-hand experience of being sort of being a carer. So if you want to use a study, a sort of a case study, I'm not in Warwickshire, but I can give you some insight into that. So on the Menti, so I know I don't have to share my screen because people who are on Menti can see it, but I will do anyway for those who haven't got there. Here we go. Or if you're busy presenting and you haven't managed to log on to Menti, so here are the questions that people have said so far. So the first one it was about, I think, the NHS England announcement. I don't really know how that would affect the strategy unit. I think not directly, but obviously indirectly with all of our clients and the people that we work with and our friends who are part of the NHS England. So there's a couple of questions there. Do you want to pick the ones that you want to talk about, Michael?
Yeah, and I'm guessing just going through them, the value not just in the plan but in the planning, and
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's referring to me going on and on about the stakeholder groups and finding that. And I think completely agree, and I think I mentioned there's a couple of real key things I would definitely build into the planning, and actually we have done with the LGBTQ plus JSNA. So aiming to have that period of stakeholder engagement to develop recommendations and things like that has been really, really valuable.
Yeah.
Qualitative insights play into this process. Love this question because qualitative and particularly capturing the voice of the population, feeding it in, was something I remember coming into my role very early on, looking back at some of our JSNAs and going, well, we sometimes do it, but not always, and why not?
Yeah.
And for some JSNAs, and I'll highlight our healthy aging JSNA for this, we had focus groups, we had a survey that went out. We did so much, and it adds a lot to the JSNA. We've got quotes running through it, and it's really great. How we put this into dashboards is something we've started discussing. The short answer is we really want to, and we're trying to figure it out. Some of the initial ideas is, can we do sort of pop-ups? So could we have buttons on the dashboard where you click it and you might get a quote pop-up? Actually, with our Empowering Futures dashboard, one of the pages is just dedicated to survey feedback and some of the mixture of quantitative survey data, but some of that qualitative response as well. So I think we're going to be playing and trying to figure out how to feed that in, because I think it really adds something for
It's so important,
commissioners,
isn't it?
and
Yeah, it really
exactly.
enriches everything, and brings quite a lot of topics alive for people as well. So some people are really just can't tune into sort of broad recommendations, and even if something is very sound in terms and robust, just something that to help sort of bring it to life in terms of somebody's quote or just someone's personal experience. So what else have we got?
Absolutely. Question about capacity across your team. Is it all public health, or is it shared? Within the council, I think it's fair to say JSNAs are quite public health led. We do try to get as much buy-in as possible. So we work with other analyst teams. So some of Fran's equivalents, whether that's adult social care, whether that's community safety, and pulling data. And they've been great in supporting JSNAs before. Where appropriate, we want to reach into other teams. So education has always been very good with our children's JSNAs. I think public health still carries a lot of the weight of the doing, but having that experience and insight has been invaluable for us. Mark Harris, going on to the next one,
Okay.
haven't come across that. We'll definitely be looking that up afterwards. So thank you for sharing that. Do you use JSNA refresh to inform priorities to focus on within the Health and Wellbeing Board strategy? We absolutely should, and we are at the minute. I say that because the last strategy we did a lot of responding to within JSNA world. They decided what the priorities were, and we did JSNAs about them. But this time, myself and Fran have been involved in a piece of work to feed in JSNA data. We've actually taken the approach of national drivers, so starting with that as a point and looking back at JSNAs, but pulling out information. But certainly in terms of our impact monitoring work, we very much want to feed in how JSNA has informed that, because anybody who's read JSNA guidance will know that's one of its responsibilities, is to shape the Health and Wellbeing Board strategy.
Absolutely.
So
I can't seem to move
Rachel.
these. That's right. I can't seem to move this on, so I'm going to do it like this.
We can.
Can you see? Can you see? So this is the one. Hang on. Let me just go back to. Let's try that. I can't scroll down for some reason. That's okay. So I'm not recording. Oh yes, I am. Can you see the next questions? I think
I've been able to scroll down, so I'll read them out,
yeah,
and then
we can. How very kind of you.
So we cover about 100 topics in our JSNA, then have some more detailed needs assessments like that you described. Do you also have a broad assessment of the whole system separate from your needs assessment? I'd want to ask definition of broad assessment of the whole system separate. I think our work program previous has focused on those thematic ones that I've shared. So we that has been our sort of bread and butter. We do bits of work using JSNA information to pull out into different packs. I mentioned the housing one where we looked back and pulled out findings to inform something else. But it's very much been a focus on those that have been in our work program. Fran, you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention we have an overall report, a Power BI that's on our Warwickshire County Council website, which is called Monitoring Health Inequalities, and that provides an overall view of the key measures around health inequalities. So that is like a sort of high level, broad look at key metrics across the patch, if that is a partial answer to the question. I'm not sure how to share the link. I have put it into the Menti so people can see it, but I'm not sure if I put it in the chat that will work. So I've done that. But if you just Google Warwickshire's Monitoring Health Inequalities, you will come up with it, and that might answer some of that question.
Thanks, Fran. The next one, how have we found engagement with commissioners when undertaking the JSNA? My completely honest answer is mixed. Some of them have been fantastic, and actually, really, some of our children and young people commissioners have really bought in. And in fact, the Empowering Futures dashboard started off as an idea of a commissioner who used to be an analyst, so background with Power BI, but that was part of that co-working. And actually, there's probably something to be said there about having regularly engaged our children and young people commissioners in JSNA processes. They know it. So by the time we got to the last one, they knew exactly what was expected of them. And some lessons learned there about making our ask particularly clear to people coming in who might be new. Some other JSNAs, we have found it very challenging getting buy-ins with commissioners, and we try to be creative with how we have adjusted to that, whether it's putting in individual meetings if they're not turning up to our task and finish groups and engaging in those sorts of ways. It's also appreciate commissioners are very busy and have a lot to react to. But I'm also hoping that some of that buy-in is to do with the long period of time that people are asked to engage with, and by shortening it, we'll encourage that. So it'll be interesting to reflect on that question in 6 months, a year's time, when we've been just doing Agile for a while, and see if that's helped. The offer from Staffordshire JSNA, yeah, it'd be great to have a chat and hear about what you've been doing. So unfortunately, I don't know who that is, but Rachel, I'll give you my email for the I don't know if anything gets circulated after the email, after the meeting email wise, but do reach out. Or actually, I can put my email in the Menti, can't I?
Yeah, that was
Let me do
really
that.
Oh, I'm now moving, so I can now move things. I'm very excited. Okay, I wonder who that is. I'm just trying to look who's here. Who is that from Staffordshire? You don't have to say.
It's me, Caroline Carter.
Hello, Caroline.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
That's very kind of
Yeah,
you.
thank you for the offer, Caroline. I've put my email in the Menti, so
I'll
do
drop you an
me an
email.
email. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
no
Thank
problem.
you.
Okay.
And then we've got
great idea.
Yeah, got the link to. It's something, this is going off on a complete aside, but I have wondered before about a JSNA network. I think there might have been one that existed pre-COVID, but constantly making JSNA contacts, it could be a very interesting thing to look at.
And I think that's a good idea. I mean, you feel like it's one of those things. You feel like this must exist because that's such a great idea, but then you realize actually it's not as obvious as that. But JSNAs have been going for so long, and so many people have been contributing and to them for so many years, and like you're saying at the beginning, everybody has to do them, everybody does them in different ways, and there've been these thought processes have been done at different stages by different local authorities and others as well. So it'd be great just to pick people's brains, and like Caroline's sort of offered to talk through what they're doing in Staffordshire. I was in Staffordshire before, so I can I know the journey that people have gone through there anyway, to think about things in a different way from the place-based approaches, which is still highly relevant, but it's all about trying to describe things in a way that makes sense to the people who need to do something about it, like you're saying, so the impact of it. So there's I think it's just really, and it's almost like an ongoing conversation, and it'll never be perfect because it'll never be perfect, but you'll get closer and closer to having something that people can use, that is accessible, and that you can demonstrate the impact, going forward, and ultimately sort of improve health and well-being, so that's your job, Michael. So but I think that network is don't assume that because something is a great idea that it already exists, because I don't know that it does. Something specifically for that, and how to approach them.
Absolutely. I can see one question's just popped up
Okay.
at the bottom. How do we balance different needs, as some people want very brief JSNA work, whereas others want more detailed work? I guess two parts to this answer. Historically, because of the way we structured our program with these much bigger pieces of work, we tended to find that if people wanted smaller bits included, they'd engage specifically. So there's some stuff in our children's ones, for example, where the one that jumps to mind is we've worked with our child death overview panel colleagues a bit in those. They have specific bits they're really keen to highlight, so we work with them, but we was able to incorporate it as a bigger piece of work around those themes, and we've always been reasonably protective of our work program and capacity and not going beyond it. I think in terms of looking forward, though, this is where I'm hoping Agile will be able to be agile. If someone wants something really brief and it's one data point, you might take 2 weeks. Brilliant.
Yeah.
We'll crack on and move on. If someone wants something a bigger, we'll just balance that with our sprint capacity and look at that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works in the new one.
Yeah, no, that's great. I said we've got a minute to go, so I'll sort of draw us to a close. But I'm familiar with the sprint approach. I used to be a sprinter. No, that's a long time ago. I'm familiar with that, and it seemingly has great success. And yes, it's having that much more accessible product, more flexible about. It's not going to take 9 months, because actually, we've defined something that's only going to take 8 weeks or something like that. I really hope it's going to work. It'll take a lot of organising. So I hope you've got a good spreadsheet or a fantastic Gantt chart or whatever tools it is that you use to help you on that journey. But thanks ever so much, Michael, for sharing all of that with us. It's really stimulated some thoughts, I can tell, and some discussion as well. You may not have answers to all of the questions that you're posing, but I'm sure we can. I'm sure it'll be successful. Whatever you do. So thanks again. I'm just going to. I will close us in a sec, but I'll just move on very quickly because I just can't remember what I've got on my next slide. Oh yeah. So next huddles we've got. I'm still wanting to share the new hospital program demand and capacity model. We weren't able to do that last time, so hopefully that'll be coming up soon. And we've got various other amazing huddles coming up. So do come back. Do come back for more, and please also do come and share with me any ideas that you have for future huddles. And as always, it's absolutely marvellous to see everybody here. Go off and enjoy the sun, and thank you to Michael and friends, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks, everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.